Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Croftons Social Housing Team seminar and discussion forum on renewable energy. I'm Simon Layton, the managing partner of Croftons, and I'm joined today by a number of my colleagues from the 12-strong team of our dedicated social housing department. A couple of who form part of our distinguished panel of speakers, amongst others who are clearly experts in their sector. It was a response to client feedback that we had earlier on in the year that we launched a number of initiatives to help registered providers with matters connected with renewable energy, and we've done a number of things, including seminars such as today, regular updates to clients, and various guides. We did a seminar in the summer along the lines of solar photovoltaic panels, and we rather expected at that stage that today would be a natural sequel to that in terms of further developing the opportunities that were available to registered providers in this particular area. Of course, since then, there's been a pretty big spanner thrown in the works with the announcement from the Department of Energy and Climate Change on the 31st of October that accelerated the date for the reduction in feed-in tariff from what was anticipated to be next April to the 12th of December. I don't know whether you're familiar with the vernacular to deck something in, but if you are, the acronym of the Department for Energy and Climate Change might resonate happening with you. And that certainly seems to be the view that the media have taken in response to all of this. It seems on a daily basis that there's a headline that is this the end of solar panels and so on. Now there are various challenges that are being levied at the government in response to that, and the primary purpose for today is to explore what is the future for solar photovoltaic panels. Will the challenges be successful? What does the Green Deal offer to help tenants of registered providers? So these are some of the questions that we're wanting to explore today so that we can avail ourselves for our tenants of those opportunities. So to enable us to deal with those questions, perhaps you'd allow me to introduce our panel for this morning. Our first speaker is Lucy Worrell. Lucy is a partner in our social housing team. Lucy has gained a name over the last 12 months for being very much a guru in this sector, having written a number of guides, had a huge number of articles published in the media, been asked to speak on a national basis, and been nominated for a number of awards in line with this sector. And Lucy's going to be taking us through the review of the feed-in tariff, the various challenges that are being made to the government, and the commercial options that we believe remain for registered providers. Our next speaker is, following Lucy, is Colette McHugh, who's the Director of Asset Management at City West Housing Trust. She's going to be sharing her experiences of City West Housing Trust, the journey they've taken in already fitting many solar panels, and how they've sought to reduce the environmental impact of City West, and what City West sees as the way future, and what's motivating them in terms of moving forward in this area. Our third speaker is Long Tween, who is a senior technical consultant from Cranage. Cranage are a key manufacturer of solar panels. Ong is a departure from the published speaker. We had the managing director from Cranage coming to speak, because as a result of the changes on the 31st of October, you can appreciate that they've never been busier. And having spoken to Ong, I'm confident that he'll be a more than adequate substitute for one. So we look forward to his guide through some of the technical aspects of solar panels. He will be followed by Bob, who is also a partner at Croftons. Bob's our commercial real estate partner, and he is officially launching, as part of his team, an iPhone app today, which is called the Site Surveyor, and he'll be explaining how this particular app can help registered providers with survey type reports of any kind, but specifically in the area of renewable energy. And last but certainly not least, having had a very informative discussion, is our speaker Emma Pryke, who's from Gen 2 Green, It's a fascinating story with Gen 2, how they started having bought stock from Sunderland's local authority and how they developed that into a registered provider, and they bolted on construction arms, an arm that deals with manufacturing solar panels. Hugely innovative and a fascinating story. She's going to be helping us with aspects of the Green Deal, financing of it, and a review of tenant views. Those are our speakers for today. Just in terms of a few housekeeping matters, you might have noticed there are people filming here today. Again, that was in response to client feedback. There were many people who weren't able to come today but wanted to hear the speakers, so we're providing that for them. It will be available in webinar format after today if you wanted to share with colleagues. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lucy Boyle.
Simon, thanks everybody for coming this morning. As you can imagine, since we've been planning this seminar, things have changed quite significantly. My talk has changed a few times as well. So what I was planning on doing today was running you through the drop in the feed-in tariff and what's going to change. The challenges that have been launched over the last week or so to the consultation, what the commercial implications for registered providers might be, putting their schemes together going forward, and an overview of the legal steps on two different schemes, being outright purchase of panels and rent-a-roof schemes, and an update on some specific legal points that have come about since our last seminar that we ran. As you probably all know, the Department of Energy and Climate Change announced a consultation on 31st of October, and that runs until the 23rd of December. And that affects installations with an eligibility date on or after the 12th of December. And the new rates that form part of the consultation will come in from the 1st of April. And for installations that are less than 4 kilowatts, that will drop down to 21 pence as opposed to the 43.3 it was previously. But for registered providers, of course, it falls into the multi-installation tariff, so it's a drop to 16.8p rather than 21p. There's been talk in the press recently about for the schemes that are already ongoing and where there's a rush to get the panels installed as soon as possible before the 12th of December. What's the actual cut-off date for getting the panels installed? There's been talk in the press of it being as far in advance of the 12th of December as actually the 24th of November. That's not actually the case. That came about because the installer has 10 working days to provide the customer with the MCS certificate, which then has to go to the utility company to claim the feed-in tariff. And there was talk about building that period into the time of the installation of the panels. But as long as you get your certificate, then it looks as though the date for the final installation is going to be the 8th of December, which is a Thursday, which allows the submitting of the various paperwork that needs to go to the utility company in order to claim the feed-in tariff. But of course, I'm sure that if panel suppliers have got a large scheme in hand, then they're talking to the utility companies about when is the actual last date, and whether they accept applications by email or electronically over that weekend. But the actual cut-off time is midnight on the 11th of December, which is when the utility company needs to have the application in to claim the higher feed-in tariff. Of course, it is just a consultation that's being run at the moment, but the thinking is that this is going to happen. The Department of Energy and Climate Change has, however, confirmed that as part of that consultation, they won't bring forward the dates of the 12th of December or 1st of April, so they won't make it any worse. I've just given you there the table of the different tariffs. That's the information after we go away, but I'm sure you'll have already seen those already. As I'm sure you've seen in the press, I think it was covered in the news at the end of last week, there have been several challenges to the consultation because of the potential impact on the businesses that have tried to make some progress in this area. I'll just run through what those have been. Inside Housing have got a campaign called the Green Light Campaign, and you can go on their website and that links you to a petition that you can sign. And they're campaigning and calling for the government to provide financial support to protect tenants from fuel poverty through the Green Deal and through PV schemes. The Director General of the Confederation of British Industry has also criticised the move to drop the feed-in tariffs. And this is the one that's hit the headlines. Solar Century is leading a consortium of other solar companies, and they're seeking an injunction to stop the drop from the 12th of December. And they describe the date as being illegal, irrational and unreasonable. The Friends of the Earth also announced last week that if there was no change by Friday of last week, that they'd be seeking a judicial review of the decision. And as far as I can see from looking last night, they're going ahead with that. There's also a possible challenge by local authorities, and the National Housing Federation are also responding to the consultation. Whether any of this will change anything, I suspect not, because I suspect the government's taken quite robust legal advice before taking this step, but we'll see what happens. It'll be an interesting few weeks anyway. So what the commercial implications for social landlords going forward, what can you expect to see the next few weeks and months look like in terms of schemes? We were talking to a lot of different social landlords about the schemes that they were looking at, rent-to-roof schemes or raising finance to buy panels. And the ones that were at the initial stages, people have just stopped working on them for now, and they're just going to hang fire, wait and see what happens. And of course, those social landlords, they are committed to Green Deal and other PV initiatives. But I think they're going to take it at a more leisurely pace, perhaps not rush into anything. Initially, it looked like funding had pulled out of rent-to-roof schemes completely, but I've been talking to various people over the last few days, and I think that they will come back, but in a different model. And perhaps under those schemes, the association previously would have expected to receive some rent from the panel provider under the rent-to-roof leases, but that's not going to be the case now. But the schemes may be able to stack up still on the basis that they'll break even, but the cost benefit is for the tenants and the free electricity. The difficulty with that, though, is trying to cover the association's costs. They're going to need some income from the panel supplier or the funder because of the high legal costs in getting the lender's consents, particularly if you've got more than one lender. Outright purchase, that is probably still going to be the most favoured option, but the difficulty is because of finance rates. If you're borrowing the money to buy the panels, then it still might not be enough. They might not be low enough for you to break even. But it seems as though the Green Investment Bank may be putting aside a pot of money not only to fund the Green Deal, but to fund PV schemes outside the Green Deal with rates of a possible 2%, which may be enough for allow associations to break even, and so the schemes can go ahead. But I would keep watching as things develop over the next few weeks and months. So moving on to legal steps on buying the panels outright. Those who came to the previous seminar, we went through these in some detail. This is just more of a summary of the legal steps involved, with an update on a couple of particular issues which have come to light in the last few weeks and months. So this is if you're buying the panels yourselves, doing the installation work yourselves and going to be maintaining them either yourselves or with a contractor going forward. You'll need to consider whether you need to check your titles to the properties to see whether there might be any restrictive covenants in there which would prevent you putting the panels on, any covenants against carrying out alterations to the outside of the properties. Of course, there's cost in that. If you're having a scheme of hundreds or in the thousands of properties, for a solicitor to sit down and check every title to see what the covenants might be is going to be fairly costly. Another option is indemnity insurance, where the insurance company takes a sample of your titles and then provides you with a quote for the indemnity insurance. But because of the upgrading work that associations do on a routine basis, such as re-roofing and cladding work, it's not usually something that comes to light in those kind of upgrading works. So it may be something that you take a decision not to do anything, but it's worth considering. Your tenancies will need checking, and usually associations have different variations of tenancies that you've altered over the years, so each variation of your tenancy will need to be checked, and you're checking for the right to install the panels, to host the inverter in the roof space, and to maintain them going forward. Tenancies are usually quite robustly drafted for access rights, etc., so there's not usually any problems with those, but that has a bearing on the tenant's consent form and what goes in the consent form. It's been generally seen as good practice over the last few weeks, as this is still quite a new area, for associations to get the tenants to sign a consent form before the panels go on, and this deals with the ownership of the panels, just clarifying that that's with the association, the feed-in tariff and who that belongs to, and also the free electricity, although that's going to be passed to the tenants, whether it's to reduce the service charge on common parts, or whether it's for their houses or flats individually. Associations have liked to put something in to make sure that tenants can't claim against the association if there's a fault with the panels or if they need to come off for whatever reason. Also, that consent form can deal with or clarify any points if the tenancy isn't quite robust enough. Say if it's a house and you need to host the inverter in the roof, if it doesn't quite allow for that, you can deal with any points that need clarifying in that consent form. Right to buy and right to acquire is the issue I particularly wanted to talk about. We've been advised, taking council's opinion on this, that the solar panels and the apparatus are not classed as fixtures and fittings, they're classed as chattels, which effectively means that if you've got a house with solar panels on and the tenant exercises the right to buy or right to acquire, then the panels and the equipment doesn't automatically pass to the tenant on that sale. It still remains in the ownership of the association. So what you need to decide what's going to happen with that equipment on any right to buy or right to acquire sale. Are you happy for it to pass to the tenant and for them to receive the feed-in tariff going forward? Or do you want to retain that in some way? You may want to do that as if you've taken out significant finance costs to raise the finance to buy the panels, and then you're relying on the feed-in tariff income to offset those finance costs. Then you may not want the panels and the feed-in tariff to pass away on individual sales. So what can you do about that if you want to retain the feed-in tariff going forward? What you can do on any sale is for the tenant, at the same time as the sale takes place, is to grant a rent-a-roof style lease back to the association, which in that lease it gives the association, it means the panels stay in their ownership. It gives the right for the association to host those panels on the roof and for them to receive the feed-in tariff. Of course, you can't force a tenant to do that because it affects their statutory rights. So you may have to take a commercial view that you may lose if somebody exercises the right to buy or right to acquire, and if they don't agree to grant the rent-a-roof lease, then you may lose the panels and the feed-in tariff on those properties. But it is something that you may want to include in the tenant's consent form at the start when the panels are going on. Moving on to rent-a-roof schemes, legally speaking, these are the most complex, mainly because of the documents involved and the consents that you need to obtain because you're granting a lease. The documents that you'll have, you may have a 25-year lease and any commercial overarching, sometimes called an option agreement, with the panel provider. And the lease has to be compliant in terms of the Council of Mortgage Lenders. They've issued two sets of guidance, one for residential properties and one specifically for registered providers, and your leases will have to comply with both. Checking the titles is more important on the rent-a-roof schemes because not only are you carrying out the works to install the panels, but you're also granting a 25-year lease. And there may be covenants, particularly if you've recently bought properties, say from the local authority, there may be covenants in those leases that you can't grant a 25-year lease without, for example, the local authority's consent, and in those cases you'd have to get that consent before you could complete those leases. An option is to obtain indemnity insurance to insure against any breach of restrictive covenant that the granting of the lease or installation of the panels might bring, but again that's a cost that you might have to factor in at the outset. And again, you need to check each variation of your tenancies. You're checking for the right to install, the right to host the inverter, and maintenance going forwards again. Still on rent-to-roof schemes, the main issue has been obtaining lenders' consent to the schemes. It is possible, but it's costly, and those costs will need to be factored in right at the outset when you're deciding which model to go with, the rent-to-roof or the outright purchase. A few weeks, a couple of months ago, it's talked about costs being about £10,000 per lender to obtain their consent. That's the cost of the lender's charge in that consent, and also their solicitors' costs. But from recent experience, you're probably looking at double that. At the moment, though, that's obviously because of the timescales that have been involved, and it's the lender's solicitors' fees, looking over the documents with a fine-tooth comb to try and get them to be absolutely satisfactory for them. But I think as things progress in the next few months, I don't think you'll be looking at quite that level, but still it's going to be a significant cost. Good news on the section 172 consent. You don't need a separate application for each property. It's one form with a schedule, which has been welcome news, and you don't need a valuation to support that. You do need to inform the HCA of the schemes, but there's no need to consult with the local authority, which is one of the boxes in the form to complete. The tenant's consent form, again, or variation to the tenancy, it's also again good practice on these schemes to get the tenants to sign those, and that's to deal with the consent to the works, the free electricity, feed-in tariff, ownership of the panels. And there's also a bit of a tricky position in relation to the 25-year lease on a rent-to-roof scheme, because when you've granted a tenancy, in particular of a house, of course the tenancy is for the whole of that house, and it won't necessarily exclude the airspace above the roof, because when these tenancies have been drafted, installation of solar panels wasn't envisaged. So if the house is a tenancy, the whole of the house is already granted, how can you grant a 25-year lease of the area above the roof space that's already been demised under a tenancy? A belt and braces approach would be to obtain a variation to each of those tenancies. But tenants, when produced with a document that looks like a legal document headed up variation to tenancies, they're going to be nervous about signing that. So what's been common practice so far is to include that within the tenant's consent form, and it's the tenants giving their consent to the 25-year lease being granted. To be absolutely prudent, a variation to the tenancy would probably be better, but the lender's solicitors have been happy to proceed with the consent form so far. So it looks as though that's acceptable. And then once you've got that far, with all the consents obtained, because the leases are excluded from the security of tenure provisions, which means that because they're business leases, usually there'd be an automatic right for the tenant to renew the lease at the end of the term, so they need to be excluded from those provisions. So there's notices that need to be served for each lease, and if you're dealing with separate leases for 500 or 1,000 properties, you can imagine the paperwork on preparing those notices is quite substantial. And then you've got to arrange for the leases to be signed, and again, if you're looking at a separate lease for each property, looking at 500 or 1,000 leases, that's also quite significant paperwork involved. So to summarise, especially from talking to people this morning as well, the general consensus is that PV panel installations aren't going away, but they're likely to come back in a different format, different structure, part of the Green Deal perhaps as well. With rent-to-roof schemes, there's some significant costs to take account of up front in making your decision, including lender's costs, and also title indemnity insurance will be in the thousands as well. if you're going down the outright purchase route, then you need to take account of what happens to the panels and the equipment and any right to buy or right to acquire, build that into any tenant consent form. And also on each of the schemes, need to prepare the tenant consent form or variation. And contact details. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me along this morning to talk about my limited knowledge around PVs. It's a pleasure to be in a room full of solicitors and it not costing me any money, which is great, because all this so far has cost an absolute fortune to City West. Who is City West? We're a housing association based in West Salford. We transferred from Salford City Council in 2008, and we own around 14,500 properties, 100 shops, various garage sites and significant amount of lands within West Salford. We have £235 million to invest and make our stock decent in the first 5 years, and to date we've spent around £130 million on our stock. So we put in new kitchens, we put in new bathrooms, we put the windows, the doors in, and all very exciting. But the one thing that City West wanted to do from day one was actually truly make a difference to people's lives. So we've embarked on a number of areas. We've created employment schemes, and one of the key strategies for the organisation is affordable warmth, making energy more affordable for some of the most vulnerable people in society, and we certainly have some of the most vulnerable people in society living within our stock. So as part of our investment programme, we've done some of the passive measures, the big impact measures as we see them. It was quite interesting before talking to Bill from Fusion 21, 2 kilowatt PVs that we're talking about. We bought a 2 kilowatt iron the other day. It puts it into some perspective, really, doesn't it? That actually PVs, if it probably wasn't for the financial incentive, would we all have been so keen to turn around and look at them? And that's a question only you can answer yourself. We turned around and we looked at cavity, external wall, loft insulation, windows, double glazing, energy efficient boilers and controls. These are the measures early on that we did to reduce heat loss and significantly reduce the cost. What have we done to date? Okay, the numbers stack up, but you can see for us the important things. What does that save for people who live in our properties? How much money are they saving? So the old lady, you know, coming up to Christmas, winter, turn around, she's got an electric bar, fire, costing an absolute fortune. We've turned around and made it a priority to put energy efficient central heating in to the properties. And so a real important driver within this process was what were people going to save each year. We've also been relatively innovative around some of the products we've chosen. We, again, made a decision a while ago that we were going to look at PVs as an option for us, but there were reasons why we didn't go down PV in the full gusto of maybe some housing associations, and I'll talk a little bit in a minute about why that was. We want to concentrate some of our effort, some of our money and investment around maximising our opportunity on CES. So what we've done is accelerated our high-rise programme and brought forward a number of high-rise. And we're actually going to complete 6 by the cut-off date of October 2012. That will secure us in the region of around £3 million worth of CES funding. And one of the reasons why we've been able to achieve that is because of the impact of the EcoPod heating system, which is a mixture of external gas being piped up the externals of the property into effectively a district heating system that sits on top of the roof, and solar thermal panels that actually keep the water up. The impact of it, a reduction in carbon, 60%, and a 50% saving for customers in their heating costs. That's the important driver for us. It costs us, this is the most expensive capital outlay of any system that you can put in to a high-rise, more expensive than electric boilers, than gas boilers, than air source heat systems. But actually the important thing was this was the one that had a massive impact on the affordability of customers' heating. So we've done a lot for the environment, 71,000 tonnes of CO2, which is enough to turn around apparently and drive around the world. 6,500 times. I'm not sure who's tested that one out, but the mathematicians tell me that that's absolutely the case. And actually 71,000 tonnes is a drop in the ocean in terms of the impact that we're having on the environment. We recognise that as an organisation, but actually we wanted to do something within the first 3 years, and we consider that a considerable achievement. So then we have PVs. Now again, we're a stock transfer organisation, transferred over to Salford City Council 3 years ago with a number of covenants on properties. We've got not one funder, we've got two funders. Okay, one of those funders being significantly risk averse, maybe because it was on the day of transfer, that was the funder that was actually about to go bust. So maybe they're a little bit more risk averse than the other funder that we have. But we know throughout the process that has been a blockage for us in trying to get funders' consent to turn around and move forward on our PV programme. So, PV, the dream, it was the golden egg. And there was an awful lot of organisations who saw the cash. It made some business plans stack up. There's an awful lot of money to be made. At 43 pence, this was an incredibly strong argument for turning around and making significant capital outlay. It stacked up within your business plan. And I've got to be honest with you, everyone had a deal. Everyone. From the gas company that was coming in, the gas contractor who should be concentrating on putting gas central heating in and making sure he's meeting gas regulations. And I'm from City West Housing Trust, and everyone knows what happened last year. Gas is really, really important to us. So wasn't very keen on the gas contractors coming in and selling me PVs. Then we had the double glazing companies who were putting down their silicon guns and picking up their screws to turn around and put PVs on the roofs. Then you had the consultants. We had the consultants that were coming in. Savills, EC Harris, everyone had a deal. And you had the big contractors coming in, then you had the energy companies. And we sat for many, many days and many, many presentations, and we listened to the deal. Each one of them being slightly better than the other one. Each one of them being sign now. Because if you don't sign now, it's gone and it's gone forever. And why didn't we? Why didn't we turn around and use some of that money that we've got, some of that capital outlay, to turn around and actually spend that money now, get the PVs on our roof and maximise some of the income over the 25 years? Well, actually, we had an organisation, we had other drivers. We have a decent homes programme to deliver. We still have to put central heating into properties. So for us, turning around and forking out a significant amount of capital in this process, where actually we're getting a long-term gain, we wanted maybe to concentrate on set and get that short-term monies in. And then there was also that nagging down for us around technology. Is there going to be a better solution to a PV? Is there something that's going to be more efficient? Is there something that's going to be smaller? And as a woman director of asset management, is there something that is going to be more aesthetically pleasing? Okay, I'll leave that with you. What did we have to then turn around and consider? So we had them in, and we had them, everyone selling us a deal. And we had a couple of options, so we could turn around and buy it ourselves and do it ourselves and take the long-term gain on that. We could turn around and go for a rent the roof scheme. Or you could do option 1 or 2, which was rent the roof with a view of buying. So we had all these options that are available to us, and we chose to go down what we saw as the least risky option. And to get us to that decision, we considered an awful lot of the stuff that Lucy's spoken about. You know, as part of the process, we had to consider planning. We did try and get planning permission for PVs at the side of some of our blocks, and that was an absolute no-no. So you have to consider planning. We had to consider funders, and would they consent? And again, still a very grey area. We were still at the process where we just got there with our deal, and then the 31st of October happened. We turned around and we have to consider access. We have to consider customer consultation within the process. We have to consider who's going to maintain this, when are we going to get paid for it, when are we going to start on site, what CDM health and safety regulations do we have to put in place, and which contractor do we trust the most. Let's not lose sight of the fact here, we were turning around and going to contract with organisations over a 25-year period. Let's be honest, there's some contracting companies out there that you're not sure they're going to be there in 25 days, let alone 25 years. So a massive, massive risk for us. But we chose what we saw was a very credible option for City West, and we chose to join the AGMA deal, to which there was an awful lot of work put in by a number of housing associations and local authorities in the Greater Manchester area. Key rationale for it was, let's join that one, because if it went wrong, I wanted to have a number of local authorities that it also went wrong for. It didn't just want it to go wrong for City West. So I'll be quite open in saying that it was the least risky process for us. It was not the best when it came to cash in the long term. It was not the best deal when it came to the short term, but it worked for City West. It worked for City West and it worked for those other housing associations and local authorities because we worked in partnership. We truly worked in partnership and we were able to get a lot of economies of scale, we were able to get a lot of efficiencies. The legal advice we were able to do it together. And an interesting point that was made before, why in Europe could they maybe, as they're ahead of the game, why could they turn around and probably not learn from Europe? And the reason is there's a different legal systems, okay, that's fine. But actually, even within our own legal system, it varies so much depending whether you're a traditional RSL, whether you're funded RSL, whether you're a large stock transfer like City West. It varies so much. It varies on the type of tenancy, where your stock is, whether there are any covenants by the local authorities. So it actually varies incredibly largely, even within the UK. So we got to the point where we got through all the legal advice. We consulted with our customers. We got over some of the moral issues as well, about how do you explain to a customer, we've turned around, we've got 15,000 roofs. Of those 15,000 roofs, 4,500 of them are either south-facing or at least 15 degrees to the south. We decided that within the AGMA deal we were going to look at 1,500 properties that we would initially go with before the 31st of March. That stacked up for us. How do you? Ultimately, what you choose because of the orientation of the roof. If we turn around and deliver our programme on the basis of affordable wall, that's actually taken out of your hands. You're not potentially helping the most vulnerable people in society. In fact, because the most vulnerable people in society actually don't have south-facing roofs, so let me give you an example. We turn around and we've got 10 properties in the street. And of those 10 properties, 6 of those properties are south-facing. Yeah? One of them's encumbered. So you've got 5 properties that you can turn around and put a PV work and 5 that you haven't. How do you then turn around to explain to the other 5 tenants who may be elderly, who may be vulnerable, who may be struggling to afford their electricity costs, that actually the people up the road who are working, or who are working in the black economy, or who are causing antisocial behaviour in their areas, or who are in rent arrears, how are they getting it and how are they benefiting? So there was a little bit of work that we had to get over with our customers, with our tenant scrutiny groups, and indeed with our board to convince them that actually, yes, there are certain anomalies in this process, but a PV programme is something that we absolutely must do. So we got through that. We were at the point of getting funders' consent. We'd gone through all the risk assessments. We'd spent a fortune. And then the 31st of October happens. Now, we didn't, because we'd taken quite a risk-averse process and we'd adopted a risk-averse process, we didn't build any of the money into our business plan. So we took a very, very prudent process. So I wasn't one of the directors of asset managers who was throwing myself out of the window on the 31st of October. But there were a significant number of organisations and directors who turned around and put in for this big time, and it was going to hurt in terms of their business plan. And they're all scrabbling around now and looking at how we can make that work. But just look at the figures. £2.5 billion worth of public tenders gone, potentially. £5 million for housing associations and local authority in aborted costs. AGMA, we've turned around actually down tools. There are some organisations who are actually still delivering within the AGMA scheme and good on them. Northwoods, Stockport, we're in a better position. We were probably one of the organisations that was more ready to go than any of the others, but we've down tools, because we want to assess what's going to happen next, what's going to be the outcome of the consultation, what is going to be the outcome of the legal challenge. I don't really think there is going to be an outcome to the legal challenge. The government have probably taken, as you said, Lucy, incredibly strong legal advice before going down this process. Do you self-finance? Do you take the risk now? You know, people turn around and did analysis and risk assessments and option appraisals. based on 43 pence? Does it work at 60 pence, 16.8 pence for a housing association? Is it worth using that capital that you've got? Can you use that capital elsewhere in terms of development or other Green Deal options? Again, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked by Housing Association. And John Bridland, the Director General of the CBI, moving the goalpost doesn't just destroy projects and jobs, it creates a mood of uncertainty. And I think that's the critical thing. You've got a mood of uncertainty now. Just to put it into perspective, Mears lost £2 million write-off in their setup costs to this, and are potentially, again, if you read the press, looking at £2.8 million shortfall within their profits for this year. There are other organisations that I'm not going to mention who have literally had overnight £20 million taken off their turnover and £40 million taken off their turnover. People, contractors, have put an awful lot of money and investment into this. They've trained people, they've set up training centres, and actually now they're sitting there and looking, how is this going to work out for us? On the other hand, Campbell, you've got contractors who are out there at the moment who are turning around and putting in 50 to 60 PVs a week. And you potentially, is there going to be a picture of sort of inside housing with floodlights and contractors turning around and putting the PVs on in the dark? Might sound a little bit of a joke, but the pressure that is now on organisations to deliver before the 12th of December or the 24th of November, depending on which of the glass half full or half empty or not, is absolutely massive. My concern in that is what's going to be the impact upon health and safety. That's a big concern. But it's hurt contractors and it's hurt local authorities and housing associations. Short term. Long term is confidence within the government. Confidence that they won't turn around and cut tariff further. Confidence that the renewable heat incentive, we won't have to jump through even more hoops around that, and the funding won't go around that. I think it will significantly impact our confidence around the Green Deal. Will we turn around and will we finance? Will we turn around as organisations and put money into schemes only for the government to turn around and walk back on what has been agreed? And that's where we are at the moment, I think, in an area of complete and utter uncertainty. I'm quite positive about it. I think we will put PVs on. We were never about making money around PVs there. We were about turning around and improving people's affordable warmth. So we will still continue with the programme. And we'll link in to the AGMA deal or look at the deals that the likes of Fusion 21 has. What we won't do now, though, is open our doors to the fly-by-night who are going to come in and offer us a dream. What this does present us is an opportunity to risk assess more, to take a little bit more of a considered approach. So instead of turning around and running along with PVs and getting them done before a set amount of time, considering them now as part of our roofing programmes and a part of our other investment programmes. So, interesting time for us all. No answers, lots of questions. I think there will be opportunities out there for housing associations and local authorities, but as always, we will have to jump through 20 or 30 more hoops than anybody else, because that's the way the government perceives housing associations, not as an enabler, but as a hindrance. So, I'll leave it with you.
Thank you very much for inviting Croftons Solar. And thank you again on behalf of Croftons Solar. Yes, today, and I'd like to cover those topics during my presentation. What is the technology behind the photovoltaic system? And then how important, what is the inverter play the role in PV system? And also how you should mount the modules on the rooftop. What is the benefit of using solar energy instead of comparing other fossil fuel? And what is the future technology, and then about how much, like we are talking about efficiency, the cost and everything, I will cover during my presentation. Yeah, when we say solar system, people are confused, can I have solar panel? But when you say it could mislead to the solar panel. There are two different systems. One is a solar photovoltaic, and the other one is a solar thermal. You say, what is a solar thermal? What is the difference? Solar photovoltaic is a photovoltaic. Is originally came from Greek word Photo is a light conversion, voltaic is electricity. You can see here. And solar power is only for the water heating, like for the heater or that you want for the hot water. Yep. So now, I'm going only to specialize in photovoltaic system. Yes. In photovoltaic system, we have a grid connected and a standalone system. Grid, and then you will say, grid connected, and what is the difference? Standalone. Grid connected, you got a PV on the rooftop, and then you generate electricity, then send it to the inverter. The inverter will convert DC current to the AC, and then send it to the grid. So you store all the energy in the grid, or utility, you call it national grid. But for the standalone system, whereby you don't need it in Europe. Many Europe you don't have a power cut. Probably in Asia or where remote area in Africa or somewhere like that, you can use it. Or holiday home, you can use a standalone system. But in UK or in Europe, we only go for grid connected. So for the standalone system, just briefly, I'll tell you, the photovoltaic, the solar module will generate electricity and assign it to the charge controller. You need the charge controller, and then all the power they will be stored in the battery, not on the grid. And then the charge controller will protect overcharge and discharge. During the daytime, it will charge into the battery will store, and then nighttime the battery will discharge. Then you get back the energy from the battery nighttime. That's how it works. It doesn't store in the grid, national grid. Yep. And we have a many system, also hybrid system. You can, that's a future, but some people they do it. You can combine photovoltaic with the hydropower or any other wind power. You can do the hybrid system. By doing that, you got benefit, because in here we have in UK we don't have that much sun. People say we don't have sun. How can you generate? We don't need the sun. We just need the light. Light travels through the earth, yeah, through the atmosphere cloud. So, but in the future we might need to combine wind and maybe when we don't have enough irradiance because of the climate in UK. So, and then when the sun is not, when we don't have too much light, and then the wind always. The problem is, and then you might probably raise a question, why we don't do the wind power? No, the problem is wind is always, you can, even you standing anywhere, you have a wind. That way, you don't have time for the discharge. You are overcharging all the time. That's the problem. Yep. And okay, when we go to the photovoltaic system, we have we use a crystalline, the silicon cell. In silicon cell, you have a monocrystalline and a polycrystalline. And also for the thin film module, they use amorphous or cadmium telluride and a CIS. They use it. So, but in here, many people they use it monocrystalline and polycrystalline. People in previously they say monocrystalline. What's the difference polycrystalline? But in previously monocrystalline they are more efficient than polycrystalline. But nowadays we don't, in industry we don't say it's almost efficiently the same because technology has been improved. So and also amorphous thin film module. What is it? But for an amorphous thin film module is the very low efficiency. It's 6 to 8%. We don't need it. We don't have that much light as well. But one thing advantage is like when you use a thin film module, it works even under shading. When you put the mountain module on the top rooftop, you have to avoid all the shading, the trees and everything from the building shading. If it is under the shading, the module under the shading, it won't work at all. So yeah. Okay, let's see what is a monocrystalline and a polycrystalline. What's the difference? Monocrystalline they are cut from a chunk of silicon cell. Yep, and then into silicon. Their efficiency are between 15% to 18%. It's just a roughly anyway. But normally you can see that they are dark blue or black with the air, and then without air they are gray. And then polycrystalline. Polycrystalline, they are cut from like a multiple silicon cells, and then they are cheaper than monocrystalline because you can see that. If I ask you what's the difference, people normally say, "Oh, this is more dark, and the other one is more blue." It's not about that because of the way I just mentioned that when you cut the silicon, you can see the diamond shape here. You can see sometimes monocrystalline with the blue color as well. with this blue color, only the diamond shade. Because I just said that they are cut from silicon, single ingot. But those polycrystalline, they are from multiple, right? So that's why the shape is different. You can have a square shape. And the other one, monocrystalline, you cannot have at the moment, from day to day, you cannot have the square shape. It will still have a diamond shape in between. Okay, and I'll let you go through a little bit behind the about the technology behind the panel. So those solar cells, they produce about 0.5 to 0.6 voltage. So in order to get a bigger output voltage, and then you need to connect it, electrically connected. We call it bus bar. You can see like this one, 1, 2, like you solder it, and then you connect together in series, and then to get a higher voltage and a higher power output. Yep. And also, if you are professional enough, and then you see the panel from the distance, you can say whether they are 72 cells, 38 cells, 60 cells. And then we can say, because I will teach you now, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then across how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 multiplied 6. 72 cells? Yep. Let's go another one. If you count it the same, 10 across 6, I believe, that will be 60 cells. Yes? So when you go to the exhibition, you can see, oh, this is a 60 cell. I counted. Yeah. So, okay. I'm not going too far, or how silicon you make PN junction. I don't have time for this really. So that's all you need to know. That's solar module. And also, when you buy the solar module, we have to check the standard test condition. They call it STC. They have about irradiance 1000 watt per square meter. So if you buy the panel 240 watts, and then that will produce only, you will get 240 watt per square meter. So that's irradiance. Yeah, and also you check the panel, you will see air mass. What is the air mass? 1.5. They are the light. When the light travels to the earth, it has to go through the atmosphere cloud. So you have to be consider those as well. And the temperature, they are about 25 degrees Celsius. Only mount the module on the rooftop. Yep. And people say, oh, I bought the panel. Why? When they check with the clamp meter outside, I bought 240 watt, I'm not getting 240 watt. No, because to be honest, that's why you will never get 100% efficiency. I don't guarantee. Even the installer asked me, oh, can you guarantee? Well, that's a manufacturer, they have a 25 years performance warranty. It's not product warranty. And then it all depends on the efficiency, all depends on latitude. You are in northern part of England, you have a more shading, latitude 54, 55, coming down 53, 54, 51. And also the shading and the tail, weather orientation, south facing, southeast facing, east-west facing. So it all depends on everything, the tail orientation. So that's efficiency. Okay, that's how you make it. Polycrystalline. Here it's a monocrystalline. You make it from multiple silicon cells, and then multiple silicon. You make it the wafer. After that, you make the cells. You wire with a bus pass, and then you make it the module. We call it in photovoltaic. We don't call it solar panel. We call it PV module, photovoltaic module, solar modules, instead of using a word solar panel. Solar panel, probably solar thermal, they were probably called solar panel. And that's a monocrystalline, how they cut it with a wire saw, and cut it from a single ingot, and then silicon cell to the wafer, and then you make it to that, and then you solder bus bar and a cell, and then you make it a panel, monocrystalline. That's a standard test condition I just mentioned earlier, 1000 watt per square meter. That's a light density. Air density is at 1.5, module temperature 25 degrees Celsius. And it's very important to check, when you buy the panel, you need to check open circuit voltage and a short circuit current. Because of DNO, they wouldn't let you do it if you are going, you need to make an application for DNO, which is a distribution network operator. And if you are going farther than 3.68 kilowatt, it will be G59. You have to make, within the G83 for inverter, it has to be up to 16 amp. More than 16 amp, you have to go for G59 certificate. So we got in here for inverter, G83/1, G59/1. For the module, all the module, whatever in UK market, they must have a MCS certificate, micro generation certification scheme. Yep. And let me talk about the inverter. What is the inverter? Without inverter, can I not just get my electricity, solar panel, generate electricity, go to the light bulb? What's going to happen? If you have more light, it will increase the current and blow the bulb. So you need to have an inverter. What inverter does? They convert from DC current to the AC current. And also, I will tell you about MPP. What is it? The MPP rule, how important is it? MPP tracking is very important. Also, the inverter does is automatically shut. For example, if you have the grid, they have a power fault or whatever faulty, and then so the inverter will shut down so that it won't affect to the reverse current going back to the panel and then blow up all the panel. Then you're going to lose all the money you invest. So that's why you need the inverter as well. Nowadays, the inverter is very important for when you say efficiency, it's not only about the module efficiency. The whole system will be like, you have to think about the module, inverter, and also mounting system. Those three, the main important things. If the inverter has an MPP tracker, what is the MPP tracker? Maximum power point tracker. And then when you buy the module, they have a maximum power point voltage and maximum power point current. The MPP tracker is very important. It will track to the optimum, the best performance of the voltage and current of the PV array on the rooftop. When you have the irradiance, you have a voltage, you have a current. And then this MPP tracker will track the optimum of the yield. In order to get the best yield, you must have the MPP tracker. The inverter has an MPP tracker. Yep. That's very important. But nowadays, technology has been very improved. You can also even have a monitoring system, the small desktop monitoring system that can communicate with the inverter via wirelessly. You can monitor how much irradiance, everything on the rooftop. So it's very good. Yes, let's get the whole system. That's the whole system you will see. And you will see solar panel. I just show you, maybe did you look at the back? You have a two-string, polarity plus and minus. Yes? So when you say in industry, we say that if you want to get a higher voltage, you have to wire in series to get a higher voltage. But if you want to have a current increase, you have to wire in parallel. That's too much in detail, maybe you're not interested. But it's really good to know, you should know. All the installers, they just wire and then call me series. Oh, my inverter is not working. How did you wire? I wire 4 panel in series, 4 panel in parallel. But okay, 4 panel is fine. You get a voltage, enough voltage, but in order to get we have to check MPP voltage, the startup MPP voltage in the inverter. The inverter is, let's say, you have a 300 voltage in the data sheet, spec sheet, whatever you call it. Now they say startup voltage to kick the inverter, kick in the inverter in the morning, start at the inverter in the morning. You must have a 350 voltage. In this case, you have to check all the open circuit voltage I just mentioned earlier. Behind the panel, you will see open circuit voltage. That is for the 60 cell, you will see 36.8, maybe 72 cell, 43 point something. So you have to check whether I should wire. You just multiply 4 multiply 36.8. How much? Okay, is it enough for 350? If it is not, I have to put another panel. That's why you need to know those things as well. All the open circuit voltage and everything. Okay, and then let's say you wire together, and then you will have the first here polarity plus, let's say, and then minus here. But you still need a solar cable because you mount the module in portrait, let's say in vertical. The module, the end minus is there, plus is here, polarity. You need the cable to come here if your cable is going down to the inverter. So you need the solar cable. And then in order to get an MCS now, all the inverter nowadays, it has a DC switch inside integrated. But still, the DNO will ask you to put the DC isolator. Just in case of the emergency, you don't need to do that. Let me show you. We call it DC connector. DC switch. You just pull out that one, and then there's a switch there. You just disconnect it. We call it ESS, electronic solar switch. In here, you just pull it out, then you will find the switch inside. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to touch the inverter. In case of emergency, you just switch off DC isolator down. That's it. And then it won't affect any to the panel. And then you must have one AC isolator after the inverter as well. And then generation meter. If you are feeding in, if you are on grid, feed in, feed out. But you can also see how much you sell to the DNO, how much you feed in to the grid. You can also see in the inverter as well, how much CO2 emission CO2 you reduce today as well. Everything you can see. But if you want to see with the big screen, nowadays we have the monitoring system as well. Everything you don't have to be at home or in UK. You can go to the Africa or Asia and then sit down and then on the beach and watching your system, how much you are generating and then how much money I'm making. Oh my God, okay, I'm sitting on the beach and having beer. Look at this, I invest that much money. You can see from their website. Yeah, nowadays. Okay. And roof mount is very important. How many roof mount? You can mount integrated roof, aerial or non-integrated, which is there on the roof. Or for the flat roof, 0 degree inclination. If you mount 0 degree and then you just mount panel like this, you will never get the energy, power, because your heat is very bad. And ground mounted, if you have in the garden or in the big field, solar park, you use a ground mounted. Let me show you the sun picture. That's integrated system. You have to remove all the ties, whatever flat tile, roof tile, anything, and then you put this, what do you call it, flashing, and then you mount the module. So it looks nice, but more expensive than on roof system. They are in roof, and we call it the other one is on roof because they look very nice. You remove the tie, it will be the same level with the tie. Yep, that's an in roof, and then that's an on roof system. That's a normal pan tile roof, but where it look like German pan tile roof. And that's how you make. You have to remove the tile, and then you have to, whatever you call, I call it roof hoops, or you can call it bracket or roof fastener. You can call this one. You have to remove. You must fix onto the rafter. You cannot fix on the back tank. Back tank are very small. Even in England, comparing to Germany or any Europe country, the rafter here absolutely very small. It's very small, so we have to be very careful because the strength of the rafter. If you put too much, that's why we normally recommend to fix 3 screws into the rafter. Otherwise, you're going to break the rafter. Rafter too small. And you have to know the span length. In here, probably 400 millimeter apart. The space in rafter. That's how you fix it. I'm not going into too much detail. And if you have a corrugated roof, no problem. You don't need to remove. You cannot remove corrugated sheet, the whole sheet. You just penetrate with the bolt, rafter bolt or hanger bolt to the piling. Yep. And that's how you fix. And for the flat roof, if you have a flat roof, for like a commercial roof, normal domestic roof, you can't hardly find flat roof or maybe some. Yeah, but you have to mount at least in here. You can say 35 degree inclination because we are south facing. But don't worry if your house is not south facing. If it's east west, you say, am I still getting? If my PV will stay generating electricity, of course, yes, you will. But the sun rise, in theory, the sun rise, not in theory, from the east, and then goes down in the west. So, from the, when you have the different orientation, but in the morning, the sun will hit to the east, the panel from the east. But in this case, that's why how important is the MPP tracker. You have to find the MPP, the inverter, which has 2 MPP trackers. Or you must have 2 inverters. So that in the morning, 1 MPP tracker, you wire those panels from the east, the panel from the east, you wire to the 1 MPP tracker. And then from the module from the west, you wire into another MPP tracker. So 1 MPP tracker will track the optimum from the east, and then the other one, probably afternoon time, they will track from the west. That's how important MPP tracker. So yes, so normally those flat roof, you should increase your inclination. You cannot please do not just mount straight. You will not get any energy. There you go. And then, but the problem is you have to put the ballast, otherwise the wind will lift it easily. Yeah. In order to calculate ballast, you need to know whether you are near the sea, how high is your building, you're on the hill, everything. And that's ground mounted. You can do ground mount as well, like a solar power. In the garden, you can do it as well. But you need to have a foundation or drilling foundation. They are more expensive. You need a pull-out test, a lot of pull-out tests as well. But for their foundation, this concrete foundation, they are more cheaper. When people ask, installer, they ask me, oh, can you give me, how much should I dig? Well, I don't know where is your location. I never see what ground look like. How the ground is soft or is it strong enough? We need to know whether the pull-out test, how much. But in a rule of thumb, I say 3 feet. You have to dig into that for the foundation. It's like this. Okay. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope it's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and good morning, everyone. You probably have looked down your agenda for this morning's events and recognised things like the Green Deal, feed-in tariffs, etc., and then came across something rather different called Site Surveyor. Now, it's a fair question if you're wondering what on earth it is, because officially today is the launch of Site Surveyor to the social housing community. So you're getting the first kind of dibs on this one, effectively. So hopefully, over the next 10 minutes or so, I'll be able to explain to you exactly what Site Surveyor is, what some of its functions are, and how hopefully you will see that it can benefit yourselves, maybe some of your colleagues back at the office, or other work contacts. Site Surveyor, what is it? Well, basically, it's a free downloadable iPhone app which we've developed at Croftons in conjunction with Free Sheet Limited, who are also doing the videoing today. They've done the technical development side of it. And essentially, it's conceived to prepare photographic schedules of condition of buildings and other property sites. It basically allows you to take photographs of parts of buildings, might be defects that you want to highlight. Linked to that, you're able to do a voice recorded description of what the problem is or one of the features might be of that particular site. And you're also able to do a kind of manual text version of what that defect might be. Those 3 pieces of data are all linked together, and I'll hopefully make the point in a short while that that's actually quite key to why Site Surveyor can bring some advantages to you. Once you've actually been on site and got the data, whether it's photographs or the verbal descriptions, you can then email that back to whoever you like, basically. So you might have someone who's, I don't know, on the East Coast surveying a property today. Their office happens to be in Liverpool, not the easiest commute, but what they can do, they can actually send this data whilst they're on site and get it back to base quickly. So we're looking at saving people time, reducing transaction times, avoiding delays, frustration and cost. Site Surveyor. Why did we do it? We're a firm of solicitors at the end of the day. Why would we want to develop an app for surveyors? Apart from the fact that we're very nice people. Well, generally speaking, I know collectors have mentioned views on this already. I'm not going to go there right now. I'll save that. Why did we do it? Well, part of my job, I've been involved in commercial leases for probably too long, about 15 years. And one of the things that we tend to do, say we're acting for a tenant company, they're taking a 10-year lease of an industrial depot or a warehouse. Now, unless it was a new build, there's no way on earth I wouldn't suggest to them that they don't get a photographic schedule of condition, they qualify, they limit their repairing obligations before they enter into that lease. Typically that's a job done by building surveyors. Now, unfortunately for building surveyors, I think they get a bit of a hard time because a lot of the time in these transactions, they get instructed right at the last minute, at which point they've got to schedule in the time to visit the building, they've got to head across there, get it done, back to the office, sort it all out. It adds to the delays at the end of a transaction where maybe the parties are already getting frustrated about how long things are taking. That kind of highlights some of the problem involved. I mean, surveyors will go on site, they'll typically go on with their digital camera, they might go with a dictaphone, they might go with a notepad as well. So they've got 3 separate data sources. You can see what can happen, obviously. Sometimes when they get back to base, having maybe surveyed 2-3 buildings in a day, let's be honest, one elevation of a building that you've never seen before that day can look very much like another. Get back to base, collating the different strands of information, not always the easiest. I've seen a lot of these over the years. One of my particular favourites was an office building over in Liverpool. Fantastic building, lovely glass atrium over the reception area. At least it would have been lovely if it didn't ship in an awful lot of water. So they went over there, took the photographic schedule of condition, got the internal scaffolder, took the photos of the damage to the walls where the water had come in, went back to the office. A few days later, I got the first draft of this schedule of condition. Picture 1, atrium. Description underneath, broken toilet. Borderline amusing on one level, but to the clients it was deeply frustrating because it added to delays, it added to costs, when basically the landlord wanted the tenant in and paying the rent, and the tenant was desperate to get in because it needed the extra space. So that was the problem. We had a look around the market to see what was available in terms of products to solve what seemed like a fairly obvious issue. And I spoke with a number of building surveyor contacts. And they said, no, we go with our camera and our dictaphone, that's what we do. And that's fine. I looked on the website for the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, thinking there's bound to be a solution here. I got as far as their online shop, kind of drilled down through the different sections, got to the building surveyors, parts, schedules of condition, and the one product I found was a £12.99 digital camera, which called me cynical, but I didn't see that as the entire solution. So, it was clear there was a bit of an innovation gap there, and so we discussed the idea internally at Croftons, also discussed it with some building surveyor colleagues, and got some very useful feedback as to what kind of features they might like to see in an app such as Site Surveyor that we were going on to develop. One of the key things that came across was that they wanted a solution that would link different areas of data, so the photographs, the voice recorded description, and also the manual typed description as well, to avoid problems like the atrium becoming the toilet, again, which they were quite embarrassing for them. And when we discussed this with the surveyors, their estimation was that we could actually save between 2 and 3 days of every transaction by having all of this information linked together at the outset and capable of being emailed, to take my example from the East Coast, back to base in Liverpool straight away. Now, those are quite key benefits when you've got a landlord who wants to rent money, and when you've got a tenant who's absolutely desperate to get out of existing premises and to move into something bigger. So, Site Surveyor, what does it do? We're going to have a look at some screenshots from the app in just a moment, but just to run through some of the features that we've got on there. We've got a GPS site locator function. You might say, well, that's a bit gimmicky. Well, if you're surveying a site that's in rural Cumbria with very few landmarks that you can link it to, actually it's quite a handy feature to have. We've already said about being able to take a photographic record of the condition of the building, highlighting the defects. One of the issues that the building surveyors that we spoke to raised when we were looking into the market research for this was, well, you're using an iPhone. Surely it's not going to be as good as my digital camera. Now, I'm not going to stand here potentially technical, but Stuart and Larry, who very much are technical, assure me and have since proved that actually the camera on the iPhone is phenomenally good. So that was not a problem at all. We've obviously got the voice recording facility that I've mentioned, so once you've taken the image of the defect in the property, you can say, damage to the lintel above the left window, or what happened. And those two pieces of data are linked, they are not going to come apart. And this is part of the beauty of it. It may be that you also want to put in some kind of manual text as part of your data collection as well, and similarly with that you're able to link it all together. One of the key things, like I said already, is the time savings that this can generate. By virtue of the fact that the surveyor can be on site, you can email all of this stuff back to base, so it doesn't need that surveyor to actually drive all the way back and start collating stuff when actually they get back and they're facing about 100 emails because they've been out of the office for a while. Someone else can be getting on with that. The document can be produced, circulated by email, and we're generating a lot of time savings and saving a lot of frustration of clients. There's actually one other thing I've not put on the slide on there in terms of features that we've added, and I must confess when this was first suggested to me, I did think this is maybe a little bit on the gimmicky side, and Stuart is smiling wryly over there. It's a feature called Car Compass, and essentially what that does, it enables you to find your way back to your car, basically, from the property you've surveyed. I don't know, say you drive 200 miles to a town you've been to before, you park up on the 15th floor, or was it the second, of a multi-storey car park, and then you go off and do your survey, and you're not actually entirely sure how you get back to your car. You're very conscious that the parking's running out. It's not good. On the Car Compass, you can actually GPS locate your car. You can take a photograph of where your car is if you so wish, and use that as part of the giving you directions back to your car after you've done the survey. Not only that, but it actually, if you've paid up for 4 hours parking before you go on to your next job, say if you're up the cherry picker taking panoramic views of the asbestos roof, which isn't in quite such great condition after all, you can actually set an alarm on the app which will tell you however many minutes you want advance warning of when your parking is about to run out, so you can actually sort that out. And I'm now going to embarrass Stuart, and I have forewarned him about this, but I did think this was a bit gimmicky at first, but Stuart assures me that he's saved at least 2 car parking fines by using Car Compass. And in fairness, Stuart, that conversation was 3 months ago, so if you've not saved any more by now, I'd be quite surprised as well. Let's have a look at the screenshots themselves. I've just kind of put a couple on there. I mean, on the left, we've got all the details about the job information. So you save details of your property, you GPS locate it, you can put the details of the client name, it automatically comes up with the day the survey is done. Weather conditions may or may not be relevant, depending whether it's internal or external, or whether you've got the atrium I described earlier, which is probably relevant as well. On the right, we've got an overview of a kind of job in progress. My 12-year-old son is very keen to tell me that I seem to have some kind of technological allergy, and he's probably right. So what we tried to do in developing this was to keep it intuitive, keep it really straightforward, so that even I can use it. And essentially, you take your photo, you then get a chance to approve the photo or retake it if you're not happy with it, do your voice description if you want to do that, and then do the written description. Which then, once you've got that information, brings you to this particular screen. You see the traffic lights on the right. Essentially, whilst you're capturing the data on site, assuming that you have internet connection where you are, the data continually uploads to the cloud-based server whilst you're going around taking additional photographs. If you're on the red light on the traffic system, nothing's uploading at the moment. If you're on amber, it's a work in progress, it's in the process of uploading. And if you hit green, good news, everything's in the cloud, saved. You can take as many photos as you want. One of the concerns that the building survey community expressed to us was, well, look, this could be good for small jobs, but it ain't going to work when I've got a 600,000 square foot warehouse that needs about 400 photographs. But actually, the very fact that stuff is continually uploading, it needed a problem. So we were able to feed back to those surveyors saying, look, we took on board what you said, and we've built a solution into Site Surveyor. As I say, once everything is uploaded into the cloud, at that stage you can email all that information directly from site, frankly, to whoever you want. You might send it to the client, you might send it to your tenant, you might send it back to your office, to your lawyer, basically anyone. There's no limit to how many people the information can be sent through to. Basically, once the email arrives, it arrives in the form of a schedule. It will have the photographs on it, it will have the voice recording, which can be transcribed if that's appropriate, and it'll have any written information. Again, with a photo, voice recording, and manual text all linked together, so there aren't any of these problems with collating the information. I did say that the device would upload information to the cloud whilst you have internet connection, so that begs the obvious question: what happens when you're in an area, my office to take a rather irritating example, where the internet connection has its moments, let's say. It's not a problem. You can continue to capture the data and photographs and the voice recordings, and then once you've got the app up and running again in an area where you have got internet connection, then the uploading to the cloud will occur. Once it's completed and you've got the green light on there, you can email it through to the recipients. So, the purpose of Site Surveyor. 2 basic things. I've kind of covered them already. To save clients time. I mean, that is the biggie in terms of being able to email stuff from the actual side of the property itself to wherever, to whomever you want to send it to. We're taking days off transaction times, much to the pleasure of landlords who want their rent and tenants who want into occupation. Also, looking to save clients money. Preparing photographic schedules of condition, professional service. It's not cheap. By using this app, actually, we can cut down massively the administrative burden of doing these schedules. And so a lot of the overheads which traditionally went with preparing a schedule simply disappear. So it can make things cheaper for you. In some cases, it might make the difference between you saying, well, ideally I wanted this schedule, but there's no way I'm paying X £100 for it. And say, well, I've got the app here, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go around the property with my prospective tenant, sort this out, email it to ourselves, print it off, sign it off, job done. The only cost, your time. Why is it relevant to do that? I suppose that's the key question you might be asking. So I wanted to share with you a few examples of where I think site surveyor could be used in the renewables sector. First one, feasibility studies for installation of PV panels. Obviously, we've already heard about the need to check out the structural integrity of roofs before panels are installed. Site surveyor lends itself perfectly to that. Rather than having someone going in with a digital camera, pick the phone, possibly a notebook if it's not too windy, and go with one device, basically record all the data there. If you've got an internet connection, they can email it back to the office, onto the next house. Nice, quick, easy, does what it says. Next one, information gathering for wind turbine sites. Just recently we've been looking to work with a company who is a new company looking to start setting up about 200 plus leases over the next couple of years for single wind turbine sites. Now, by their very nature, a lot of these places are in remote locations, so again we have the issue of the drive out to record the data, the drive back before you start collating all the data. And in some cases, because they're not near anything recognisable, it was a field in Cumbria, but which one type of thing. Put a GPS condition on there, so actually that's going to help enormously. I understand from speaking with these people that for some of these sites there's quite an amazing amount of competition. Actually, you might have 3-4 companies all after the same sites because they know they can do very well in feed-in tariffs. Well, if your surveyor is on site and can capture all that information, you can get it emailed back to base, to the surveyor, to the lawyers to get on with the searches, to anyone else. You find yourself, I don't know, a day and a half, 2 days head start on the competition. So if you get ahead, you need to stay ahead, and then you stand a much better chance of actually securing that site. This one's probably relevant obviously for the social housing. The schedules of condition on handover of rental property. Again, there might be decisions to make as to whether or not it's cost effective to do a schedule at all. Go around with site surveyor before your tenant goes in, record the information, get it emailed off, printed off, signed off, job done. Nice and simple. Phased inspections of new developments. Go around, check the snagging works, say there's something you're not happy with. When you're on site, just email it through to Base or another and say, look, here's the problem, what do you suggest? Get the ball rolling a lot quicker, really. So again, we can save time, save delays and save additional costs. We've already heard about the ground mounted arrays just now. Again, that would be relevant use of site surveyor in that scenario. I get the, how shall I say, the dubious pleasure of an email pretty much daily as and when someone downloads Site Surveyor. It's been available in the App Store for a couple of weeks now, even though today is the formal launch. Sadly, that email arrives about 10 past midnight every night, and I've learned very quickly to switch my phone off before going to bed. But it's actually been quite interesting seeing the kinds of people and the kind of companies who are downloading this. We had one last week, it's a tile installation company. I was thinking, well, we developed this for property surveyors, and I'm thinking, well, actually, it's brilliant for that, because if you were going to survey, I don't know, a big room because you have to do a tile installation, you can take the photos, you can establish whether or not it needs additional plastering or whatever it requires. You can record details and the dimensions, and whilst you're on the site, this tile company is probably emailing through to the warehouse saying we need so many tiles, emailing it through to the fitting team saying this is your job, are you there next Tuesday? Again, it's just cutting out a load of delays which are frankly unnecessary. I'm not pretending that these examples, or that particular example, are an exhaustive list. I mean, to my mind, one of the beauties of a day like today is we've got kind of sector leaders here, probably with all ideas about how I could use that when we get back to the office, or maybe how colleagues and contacts can use it. Please feel free. We'd be delighted to hear from you if you've got ideas about how this can be rolled out into different areas. It's very new to us, so we really are all ears. It's very much the development phase of things at the moment as to how we can best serve you in the future. I winced at this one, having Colette's comments earlier about solicitors. So little surprise here. It's an app developed by solicitors, and actually, it's currently available as a free download. And we've deliberately made that decision because basically we want people to get used to using it. It is quite different to how people have done things. And we want the feedback really to how we can make it better. This is very much the beginning of the story on this rather than the end. At the moment it is only available on iPhone. We will doubtless get feedback about other platforms which might be possibilities for the future. But also we want to hear about what features might be added. Or in fact we might turn around and say, well actually we really don't need that feature you've got in it now. We're very open to feedback as to how we can make this best work for the intended users. So, in conclusion, I hope I've been able to explain, albeit briefly, what Site Surveyor is about and how it might hopefully assist you and your colleagues and contacts. In terms of next steps, I'd encourage you, if you have an iPhone, to download and use Site Surveyor. Perhaps you know other people who could benefit from using it as well. Please feel free to tell them about it. And in terms of feedback, we really do value that. We've had some good stuff in the consultation process today when we're developing it, but we're looking to bring in more information. So this can frankly be a device which gets better and better. So many thanks for your time.
Good morning everyone, and thank you to Croftons for inviting me along. As the title of the presentation says, Kickstarting the Green Deal, a little bit about what Gen 2 have done previously and what we're currently doing to finance retrofit projects. So, I think the audience here is mostly social housing for registered providers today, so we're quite well at getting our name out there, so I assume that everyone's probably heard of Gen 2.
No.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I've currently got a love-hate relationship going on with Inside Housing, where we're quite often got one. So, but yeah, it's Gen 2 Group, which I work for is Gen 2 Green, split into 4 companies. Our social housing arm, which has about 30,000 properties, I think, on the cards at the minute, and about 70,000 tenants. We've got a construction arm, so I think, as you were saying earlier, we've built our own houses, we've got mixed tenure estates in Sunderland, and then we've got a property development arm where we sell those houses, and also a social investment arm, Gen 2 Living. So Gen 2 Green, a bit of the organisation that I work for, is the sustainability arm of the business. So the bit that I'm passionate about, and our strapline there, is shaping a green future. Bit of a challenge working in social housing because that is not the top of the agenda for everyone, especially when dealing with housing managers or asset managers and people. And I'll have some comments about that in a second. So, at Gen 2 we met the Decent Home Standard, well, almost, you know, you've always got your mock-ups on some properties where they won't let you in through your installation, but pretty much finished in 2005. So we were looking at the next step, how could we take it further, what could we do to the properties? We put in the nice new kitchens, you know, we've got the roof done on a lot of the properties. What's the next stage? And the heating programme is winding up, it's coming to an end. So this is our journey in pictures on what we did. First of all, we went out to find funding. Who would fund us at Gen 2 to experiment on our properties and on our tenants? So that was quite difficult, but we started off with a project called Retrofit Reality, and that was on 139 properties. We got TSA funding for that back in the day, and through the HCA as well. And that was to put a range of different measures on properties with tenants living in at the time. So that was one of them was solar thermal. We looked at double glazing, which was not, as always comes back to surprise people, part of our original decent home standard, because it didn't have to be. We also put in aerated taps and showers for properties that hadn't had showers, and measures like that. And we found that we did get a reduction in energy consumption and fuel costs, but not as much as we were expecting. And that came down to, does everyone here use SAP calculations? And does everyone here agree with me that they don't represent your average social housing tenant? A lot of the properties were vulnerable people living in them, so they couldn't go out to work. So their consumption was higher in some cases. Other cases, their consumption was a lot lower because they were prioritising other things to spend their money on. So it was just all over the place on that one. But that showed us that what we needed to do was get real data before embarking on the next retrofit project, which we did when we got funded from the TSA, and that was to do 6 passive house retrofits. What I'd say about passive house retrofits is it costs £70,000 a property, so I doubt very much that anyone's going to be doing that as a realistic retrofit for the future. So the next stage is how we funded things is through looking at other funding. So we've got CERT funding, which is coming to an end, taking over by CESP funding, and then looking towards the Green Deal and the Energy Company obligation. So whereas we've stopped applying for funding pots of money, we're going down the other route of looking at how we're going to fund the investment plan as a whole. Before we started that, we did the Pay As You Save pilot. I recognise some faces where I've been out talking with Sustainable Homes Forum, where I've talked quite a lot about the Pay As You Save pilot. This was our way of saying we really, really want to help our tenants reduce their fuel bills, but we haven't got the money to do all the measures that we would like to do. And that was, talking a lot with our asset management team, our investment plan team, and looking at the measures that we wanted to do. So we worked with the Energy Saving Trust and DEC, which was very interesting, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And our first phase was, we said, look, we'll get void properties, we'll put these energy efficient measures on, it'll be great, we'll advertise them with a Pay As You Save charge, already advertised, it'll be brilliant. We're massively affected, the void turnaround time. We forgot to tell some of the housing managers, so the tenancy agreements weren't changed. We didn't tell our property shop, so some of the adverts didn't go out correctly. Void properties was then, it was a nightmare. So we had to take a step back, and that step back was when we actually started talking to the housing managers, the asset managers, the property shop people, our legal team, getting the tenancy agreement sorted. So it was a really good learning curve, because for people like myself and my director, we're really passionate about the environment, about reducing our tenants' fuel bill costs, so we tended to run at things full force and then pick up the pieces afterwards, which didn't always go down too well. So the next phase, and this wasn't officially in the scheme unfortunately, I went out to our Auckland homes. It's a sheltered scheme, 26 bungalows, really lovely people. I said, yes, Pay As You Save pilot, would you like to take part? Absolutely. I found out that their boilers were running at an efficiency of G. They were actually rated F. So when I went back to the Energy Saving Trust and DEC, they went, no, we're not going to fund that, we don't care, it's got to be an F-rated boiler. I then had to go back, where our youngest tenant in here was 76, and say, oh, you can't be on the scheme, and that was not fun at all. So we then decided to look at, why don't we put solar PV on, and look at how we can use that in a pays model. And you can't, because it won't pay for itself and rent would be too high. So what we did was we put a £1 charge on, and this is how we're modelling it and going forward. Any PV going on a property, the property has a £1 charge attached to it, and that's for the term, that's for the life of the property. It's not for a 25-year period, and that's for the ongoing maintenance. And when the tenancy changes, that £1 will be incorporated into the rent price. So we see it as, you don't itemise your rent sometimes for things like call-outs, maintenance, things like that, it's all incorporated in. We see that the maintenance of a solar panel should be included in that, and that's our justification for putting the £1 charge on. But we still managed to get some other measures on the Auckland Homes properties, and we've actually produced an Auckland Homes story out of this with the tenants' help, and it's really, really good, especially as, you know, we've got some interviews with some of our tenants who are in their 90s, and they tell it like it is. They don't make it flowery. So, and then the last phase was, we thought, well, let's do external wall insulation in the pay-as-you-save model. So we did all the rest of the measures and tried to include the external wall insulation. That doesn't work, as you know. So, yeah, external wall insulation, we thought we would maybe put an extra charge on for the tenants to cover the cost of that. It didn't work, so we've heavily subsidised the external wall insulation. We couldn't get CES funding because, even though they are extremely vulnerable clients, the multiple indices of something or other, which I can't remember, always goes out the deprivation, thank you very much. I think it's out of date. I don't know if anyone agrees with me. I've gone into areas and I know that they're severely deprived areas, but because this database that's held by an energy company doesn't say so, you can't get the funding. But again, it's, as Claire was saying, you jump through their hoops to eventually get the funding. So, but there you go. We only dropped in the end one tenant out of the last phase of the project. Not interested, and that was just because they didn't want to pay the extra charge because of the works going on, so that was fair enough. They thought that it should be free, and it was just really to highlight that whereas on this project we tried our best to go back and get actual meter readings and actual data, so that when we're comparing the actual savings we get, which is a bit of a moot point here because I haven't got the actual savings on here for this particular part of the project, but it kind of shows you that there is disparity for social housing tenants on what they're actually using, so the carbon emissions and the actual consumption. There is a disparity, but you can't really see it very well on there. But again, that's in our report, which it can be made available to you. But this is really interesting, actually. We've been modelling, and we use PV salt model before we install, but we're using passive systems to monitor exactly how much we're generating on every panel that we've installed. And it's really easy once you get a passive system signed up, because you can just print off the data. So we're on to September, so you can see how the next months have levelled out because we haven't got the actual readings. But you can see our actuals compared to the PV Sol and the SAP is really good. We're overproducing, so we're really happy with that. And we've been out and talked to tenants, looked over their fuel bills, and they are saving more than they are paying. So the golden rule that everyone's heard about is definitely working with this. And this is on, it says Hillview Road, that's the Auckland Homes properties. So it was a bit of a success. We managed to get tenants willingly to sign up, in the most part, to pay for energy efficient measures. And in fact, we had a lot of tenants who've been on our website and seen that we're doing this project, ringing us up to ask to be on the next project. We didn't know we were going to have a next project, so we just took their details. So we thought, well, wait a second, everyone's saying that social housing tenants won't pay for anything, you know, they all want something for free. And we thought, this actually flies in the face of that. So we might go out and speak to them ourselves and get some real data. So we did something called the Green Debate. And it was myself and our team went out and spoke to about 600 of our tenants. I say spoke, sometimes it was email or letters, and we sent surveys out in our newsletters. So we're quite impressed with the 600 responses that we got, and I think you'd be quite impressed with the results there. So would you be prepared to say pay for some energy saving measures? We got 504 yeses, so that's 84%. And that was to be put on the weekly charge, the rent. So, and if yes, how much would you be prepared to pay? So it was like the over £5 under. if you've read anything about the Pay As You Save model, most of the payments on the original pays for the new boiler, new windows, and some of the other measures came out is about £4.50, depending on how many windows they were having installed. So we thought that was quite encouraging. 55%, like we expected that. If you're given a choice of less or more, you're definitely going to go for the less. I would. So broken down into the measures that people would actively be willing to pay more for, one of the biggest ones coming out there is the solar PV, and it's the free electricity. Obviously the side of it is the draw. Now I know Claire was saying earlier it's kind of like moving away from saying you get free electricity, and we found that was really important as well, and also really important to distinguish between solar thermal, because I'll go out and speak to people and say, are you interested in the solar PV? And like, well, no, I don't want a massive hot water tank taking up my airing cupboard and things like that. So, and the power of tenants' opinions influencing other tenants' opinions, as you might be aware, is immense. So you'll get one person in the street saying, oh, you don't want that. You'll lose your airing cupboard space, blah blah, they'll wreck your house, they're going to rip out your kitchen, the rest of the street, and then it goes to the next street, oh no, I heard you're going to take my kitchen out and my bathroom. Like this one. So that's moving on from the sort of the Pay As You Save, the green debate. We thought, right, what we're going to do is look at the Green Deal, look at that sort of model and make it work for a social housing provider. So it's I'll come on to the adding solar PV increases the investment. Well, return investment, we'll have to rethink that one a little bit. But energy efficiency improvements makes home, and the costs are paid back through the energy bills. So we're working with British Gas at the minute. I knew going into this that getting our tenants to agree to pay their bills, the extra charge for having energy efficiency measures through their fuel bill was going to be a challenge, and I wasn't wrong. I put my hands in, I wouldn't want to do that, because I like the freedom of going on Uswitch or whatever and switching supplies whenever I want to, but even if I don't. So at the minute we're at 50% of the tenants that are currently with British Gas have said no. So, and that was quite a small number of them. We've not got anyone to change over at the minute. And I'm happy saying it because we're working towards trying to get this model to work. But tenants want to pay for things through their rent, not through an energy bill. But it's a challenge, we're working with it at the moment. So we looked at the measures that we were going to offer, obviously PV not being one of them. So that's why the fix isn't a massive part of our experiment with the Green Deal. But we're offering in cess areas and areas where we're having roof replacements, these sorts of offers. So we're doing window replacements, heating upgrades. We're finished now, we've got official work on our installation. And today, we're calling it was called Kickstarting the Green Deal, but we've actually called it the Energy Saving Bundle. Because there's different bundles you can get. If you want, you can get 2 windows, 4 windows, depending on how many windows you needed. And if you've got a roof replacement coming up, you can then additionally get the solar PV. And that is still for an extra £1 a week. The windows are charged at about 12 pence a week, I think. And the windows are charged at 12 pence a week for 15 years, but indefinitely for the solar panels. And the heating is free. We would charge for replacing someone's heating from a G-rated boiler. So at the minute, our figures are total number of properties that we've identified is 1,055. This is just on the energy saving bundle project. Tenants that we've engaged directly, including our no accesses, is 887. So we've been doing this over the last 8 weeks. We've got 745 agreements and 145 refusals. I've actually been out and spoken to some of the people about why they're refusing. A lot of it's about not understanding what the measures will do for them, about the minimising disturbance, and it's understanding what concerns people have. I've been out to a property, another bungalow, with a lady who said that she'd just decorated her hallway and she was 85 and she just couldn't be dealing with the stress of if she had a solar panel on, what would happen. And I explained, because we looked at where her fuse box was, and it was in a cupboard by the door. So if you think, if the solar panels going on the roof, the inverters in the loft space, she's never going to see any wires. So it's literally taking her through that process. And I think it's really important that someone who knows what's going on is at the property to speak to the tenant, and that just sort of allays their fears. But by using these sorts of mechanisms, we believe that you can make your homes more energy efficient and more quickly. And it's about reprioritising your investment plan as well. And that's why, having really spoken to our asset managers, identified that it's much better to look at our roofing programme and go with the roofing programme as well. And then also when I've been out and spoken to tenants, the ones that are refusing, I thought it might be £1 charge that was cutting off, because we're very, very conservative on our estimates of savings, because it's massively down to behaviour change, and we tell them that they have to change their behaviour. We tell them exactly how to do it, the washing machine on during the day, that sort of thing. But I was very surprised to find that a lot of the people didn't want the solar panels on the roof because of the way it looked. So they were getting choice of free electricity through the day, big reduction in your fuel bills, but they didn't like it. And the best one was when I went out to see a lady who just moved into her property, and I looked at the roof quickly, so I think it'll be on the front. She went, oh no, I don't want the solar panels. And then my colleague came over, who was doing the survey, oh no, it'll be on the back. And she went, oh yeah, I'll have it then. But if you think of a street and her living room's at the front, and she really doesn't like the look of solar panels, how often do you look at the roof when you're going home? But how often do you see your neighbour's roof across the street? So I really didn't understand her argument on that one, but I didn't say anything. I did point it out. So you've got to decide it. So having spoken to our asset managers, we basically looked at how we could rejig our investment plan to really push this side of things. So that's where I've been explaining the Green Deal, which is our energy saving bundle project, is in sort of Low Ford and Hendon, which is what we've identified as two cess areas, and they are definitely two cess areas. So there really is the right levels of deprivation. And we're using cess funding as well to do external rendering on our multi-occupancy properties. So they're not high rises, because we've done those, but they're sort of the three-storey flats that we've got. We think it's the first sort of true Green Deal pilot going on at the moment. We're speaking to our tenants continually to see if we can improve what we're offering them, and as you know, tenants will always give you the truth and tell you how they feel about how things are going. And obviously we're looking at we are working with British Gas, and we are trying to get the sign up increased on having it recovered through the fuel bill. So we have recovered extra spend that we didn't expect to recover because of the sign up. So and the customers saving more, but also we didn't expect that they would agree to pay 12 pence per window per week charge. So that was a bonus for us. But also we think that doing it this way is a sustainable approach for large-scale programmes. The downside, and I've been making some extra notes as well, and on the legal side, some things that I've kind of skipped over, but it's really, really important, is the tenancy agreements and visiting your tenants. So that's why I was saying doing it on a large scale, you get the whole team involved and you can plan a programme rather than doing it hodgepodge, because we've got to do a pre-work visit, serve a preliminary notice, 2 weeks later go back with the final notice of variation, then we do a post-works visit, and in there we do a behaviour change, and then we realised that's a bit excessive. Our tenants, as much as we think that they love us, they don't love us that much. And if you see someone's face, they're getting a new heating system, and they're getting someone visiting their house at least 5 times over the duration of the works. So for the next stage of the project, what we've done is, I think someone mentioned earlier, we've combined the delivery of the notice of variation with the pre-works. So the pre-works will go, would you agree to this? And say, yes, well, here's your preliminary, if you sign it. And then on the next visit, we do the customer survey and the behaviour change. And the whole time we're getting the behaviour change, we've developed leaflets just for our tenants and just for what they're getting installed. So if they're getting windows and heating systems, they get a leaflet for that. If they've got the solar PV going in, they get another leaflet for that. So, and it's written, that's going from our customer feedback as well. And as much as you want to impress upon them that changing their behaviour is really important, if you do it over 5 or 6 visits, they're going to turn off, and that's what they were saying, is they're getting fed up of being pestered, especially as we insist on taking lots of meter readings as well. So, the second one, and that shouldn't be dismissed, has anyone in the room worked with the DNO? I think I mentioned earlier, district network operators, if you're fitting solar PV and you're doing it on a large scale programme, they're dealing with a massive, massive increase in applications and possibly didn't have the right systems in place at the time. So, but and then again, finding the right PV panel supplier. Obviously, Romag are the best in the industry. I would say that because Gen 2 bought them in April. But no, it's serious finding the right PV panel. We've been working with, on the other side of what I do, is tender for work to install, because we've got our own team of installers now. We let them practice on our own properties, so we reckon that they're pretty good at going out and doing other properties. And we've learned through looking at designing systems and things like that, that yeah, you can get really, really cheap panels, but you know where they're coming from. And are you aware of that? Are you certain about their reliability? And for the future proofing, you know, a lot of companies want 25-year warranties and replacement warranties. Are you going to be able to get those with some of the manufacturers at the minute? So it's looking for a good European or well-known and well-thought-of solar panel manufacturer further afield, and there are quite a few of those as well. So, and then understanding the rent-a-roof option, Gen 2 absolutely did not want to go with this option, because we're not seeing that putting PV on as a way of making money. We're seeing it as a way of paying for our investment plan. And if it stays at the 21 pence, if you can get the financing, if you can rejig your investment plan, then it works. If it drops to 16.8 pence, I'm not sure we'll get board approval, and that's going to fall away for us as well. But if we get it at the 21 pence, you know, you don't get to install a bathroom and have it pay for itself in 20 years' time. So, you know, it's still on the cards for us, definitely. So thank you very much.